So welcome to what is now the 10th episode of Absolutely Zero Knowledge, and I have the pleasure of being joined by Martin from Zircuit. So let's dive straight into it. Firstly, Martin, if you could just introduce yourself, a little bit about you, but also more specifically, I guess, how Zircuit came about.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. So my pleasure to be here. Hello, everybody. So to introduce myself first, my name is Martin. I'm a technical co-founder at Zircuit. Zircuit is a new zero-knowledge rollup. I will tell you, everything about it in a little bit. So to continue about myself, I'm a technical individual in nature. I have a PhD in algorithms and complexity from the University of Waterloo. I actually live in Waterloo in Canada. I've been working in the blockchain space since 2017, which for all practical intents and purposes can be perceived that, as the entire duration of when the space has existed. And for the past 2 years, I've been together with, quite substantial team building something called Zircuit. So as I said, it's a zero knowledge rollup. But it's a zero knowledge rollup that brings something new. So Zircuit's sequencer is a little bit smarter than what we are used to from blockchains in general. When you look at blockchains as we currently know them, we have users that somehow broadcast transactions to the blockchain networks, and then some kind of block proposing entities take a look at these transactions, and whenever it's their turn to propose a block, they take the transaction and put it in the next block that has some sort of available space without any scrutiny on the content of the transaction. And so what we do at Zircuit is we have a sequencer that scrutinizes the content of the transaction. It always asks, hey, is this transaction going to hurt any of the users on this network? And so it uses some kind of machine learning model. We call it the Oracle in the working terms. So it asks the Oracle, hey, is this transaction going to hurt us? And if it does, then it doesn't include it into the next available block. It puts it in quarantine instead. So this is what we are doing differently in Zircuit, and our great focus is on the security theme. We are a research-driven rollup. We just want to do things right so that we foster space for the community where they can feel safe, where they can experiment with blockchain, where they can develop new projects and products, and generally use all the goodies that we have for them.
Cool. And how was it originally founded then? Where did this idea come from? Was it that you noticed a gap in the market in terms of a need for security in the sort of roll-up setting, or how did it come around?
Yeah, so I did say that I have a long background in the space. I worked for one of the leading security companies. My position at that security company was the head of new initiatives, which means that I was helping the company search for new products and identify new opportunities in the space. And at that time, we were essentially doing roll-up research. Roll-ups were something that was already out there and was becoming more and more prominently clear that they will be cool and that it will be the hot topic for the Ethereum community in general. And so we kind of got together with another person from the company, with the managing director, and he said, hey, so I was thinking like these rollups, could we actually build one? And that was like a very interesting question for me, because it was an intellectually very challenging exercise, right? Even more than an exercise. Building a rollup is a major undertaking. So I started thinking about that. We essentially started running some feasibility evaluation phase together with a few more colleagues, and we realized that we liked it, and that maybe Zircuit has a lot of potential in terms of us, being able to develop some of the ideas that we've always had as security researchers. For example, we were always kind of sort of sad that we have this superior security tooling that is available for us to use, during security audits, right? Smart contract audits, but use it once and that's it, right? Once the smart contracts are deployed on chain, they are just deployed on chain. And, if you miss something at the beginning in that initial phase, then that vulnerability and the potential attack vector that might be still present in the code. So we were thinking, hey, like, could we use this security tooling to, provide something that the community tends to call monitoring, right, or first response, or threat intelligence, or something like that. And so we always kind of ran into the same problem, which the entire world of blockchain runs into. It's like, well, there is no one specific gateway that would allow you to plug these tools into. When you are a blockchain participant for very good reasons, you generally, all you need to do is find a blockchain node, send transactions to it, and it will deal with it somehow, right? So if that particular blockchain node is not respecting the fact that it should be somehow using some analyses on the transactions, it's just not going to happen. But the fact that we would be developing our own blockchain, that would completely shift the paradigm. It would change the situation, right? We would suddenly be able to dictate or design the protocol in terms of how we want it to behave. And if we say, yes, transactions should be analyzed before they get included in the chain, then that should be the case. So we actually saw a massive opportunity in there. We saw something that is currently not being done. We saw that we have some expertise that maybe the rest of the developer community might not have, that we are perfectly capable of achieving something like this and build a rollup, because we already know how rollups work, and we have seen the internals of rollups through our research. And so we decided, what, maybe it's time to say bye to security as the first primary focus, and sort of become developers of a rollup. And this is how the inception of Zircuit started. And so for the next approximately 2 years, Zircuit was under heavy development, both starting with the research, going over some experimentation and design phases, over to, okay, this is something that we really want to do, and this is the way how we are going to approach it, to the development of the initial prototypes and the testnet that is currently available. And at this moment, we are sort of gearing up towards launching mainnet in the summer of 2024.
Awesome. And I'm sure we'll touch upon that in more detail a little bit later on. I know you've got plenty of bits and pieces in the pipeline, but just so we absolutely nail it, and for anyone listening, maybe not as technical as yourself, someone less technical like me, I think we're 10 episodes in, and I don't think we've ever defined what a roll-up actually is. So it's obviously a massive part of scaling blockchains and a huge use case for zero knowledge. But are you able to give a very, very brief sort of overview in layman's terms of what a roll-up is?
Yes, I can do exactly that. So we generally like to complain that layer ones are too slow, that the number of transactions that you can push through them within a time unit is not big enough. And so rollups are one of the solutions that the community and researchers came up with for tackling this problem of scaling. And so if you want to imagine a rollup, essentially imagine a blockchain that you have started completely separately from your mainnet, and you configured this blockchain so that it can be ticking a little bit faster. Okay, so it produces the blocks much faster. Hence, the scaling, right? Now, the blockchain can actually do that, because what we also do in rollups is we kind of defer the consensus to happen on the layer one. That's the network that we are trying to scale. So we would say, hey, let's create a network, let's create a blockchain. We will not be having a huge number of participants kind of forming consensus on what the sequence of transactions and blocks is. We will defer that to layer one, but instead we will be ticking faster, and every once in a while we are going to take the state root that represents the state of the blockchain, and we are going to record it inside of a smart contract that sits on layer one. And that recording sort of represents the moment when that state of our layer two somehow became final, or almost final. It becomes final when layer one reaches finality on the block that has that transaction that records state. So this is the principle of a rollup. Now, we actually distinguish between two families of rollups, and the two families differ based on how we as users of rollups treat the correctness or convince ourselves of the correctness of the state that gets persisted inside of the smart contracts on L1. So we distinguish between so-called optimistic rollups, where this is kind of a trust me bro situation, where you can roll up that state, and then we just give everybody some long enough period of time to say, hey, this was wrong, I disagree in here, and I have a proof that you've cheated while producing this particular state. Okay, so that's why the time to actually reach the real finality on optimistic rollups needs to wait for this challenge window to elapse. So that's optimistic rollups, but I said that Zircuit is a zero knowledge rollup. So that's the other family of rollups where you are providing the state onto L1 and rolling it up into the smart contract. You are also required to provide some sort of mathematical proof, some very short mathematical argument that this state indeed was produced correctly by executing that transition function that you've promised to execute inside of your rollup. So that's why we call it zero knowledge. The zero knowledge part comes from so-called zero knowledge proofs. That's what that rollup uses as an argument that the state was actually produced properly. And the smart contract that we record the state into on L1, it has that obligation to verify that the proof that was provided together with the state actually is correct and justifies that the state was produced correctly. That's why we usually call it smart contract on L1 verifier. So those are the two families of rollups. And as I said, Zircuit is a zero knowledge rollup. The main way how users or listeners should imagine the difference between these two rollups is that finality period. So a user of a rollup would be impacted by the fact that they are on a zero knowledge versus optimistic when they want to withdraw their funds through the canonical bridge. Every single rollup, is going to provide you with some kind of a canonical bridge. That's the bridge that is part of the rollup infrastructure. It's not like a third party or anything like that. And when you want to withdraw assets from your rollup, you have to come to this canonical bridge and say, hey, I am submitting, I don't know, some amount of L2 ETH to you, dear bridge. Please lock it, burn it, whatever your protocol stipulates, but roll it up onto L2 or onto L1. And once you roll up the fact that this ETH was burned or exited with from L2, then me as a user are able to come to that counterpart on L1 and say, hey, please give me my ETH that I have exited with on L2, which in the case of optimistic rollups can only happen after that finality period, that waiting period, that challenge period elapses. In zero knowledge rollups, that can happen immediately as the proof is sort of produced, right? So from this standpoint, we chose to build Zircuit as a zero knowledge rollup. The other advantage or difference between zero knowledge rollups and optimistic rollups is that, in the bad scenario, in that case where somebody actually does submit a fraudulent state onto L1, in the case of optimistic rollup, you are waiting for some honest participant of the network who is active, who is watching, to come and challenge this, right? And that can happen anytime within that period, which lasts like 7 days or 10 days or whatever you configure your rollup with, but it's in the order of multiple days. So what you are essentially exposing yourself is this risk that, let's say, 5 days down the road after some transactions or many transactions were executed on L2, somebody's gonna show up and say, hang on, we actually had fraud somewhere in here, somebody cheated, we have to roll back whole bunch of days of history of transactions. And that would honestly be a disaster. This has never happened anywhere, to have such a deep and long reorg, right? And we all dislike reorgs because they essentially cause mess, right? So this is a concept that in theory works, but is in general widely untested. And that was just another conviction point for us that, do build a zero knowledge rollup instead of an optimistic rollup. And then, we decided to build in those security solutions that I referred to at the beginning.
Perfect. Well, Thank you so much for running through that, and you've answered my next question, which was to delve deeper into the difference between ZK rollups and optimistic rollups. So thanks for that as well. But I guess probably linking to your earlier points and your description about what Zircuit are building, but what differentiates you and what's unique about Zircuit? Is it very much that security angle and that security piece that you're focused on that differentiates you amongst the other sort of roll-ups on the market, so to speak, right now?
So the security, that is the true differentiator. When you look at Zircuit and all the other competitors that exist out there, right, the other zero-knowledge rollups, everybody has the same primary purpose. It is to scale Ethereum. So you can expect from Zircuit exactly that, as you would expect from any of the other competitors. We do scale Ethereum. But, if you decide to build a rollup right now, very soon, once you tell somebody that you are building a rollup, people will start coming and they will start asking, well, why are you building another rollup? Don't we already have 10, 15, 20 of them? Well, how many do we really need? What are you doing differently, right? And so when building our rollup, we actually did want to have the reason to build the rollup, right? And that reason is the security. So if you're looking for a differentiator, why Zircuit is different and better, maybe better than other rollups, then do look into this security category. And it is that one special feature that we have.
Mm-hmm. And why? Why the focus on security, and what's the need for security, I guess, within the blockchain setting, maybe more broadly, or when sort of building a rollup?
So I think those are two different questions. Why do we look at security is to, in the broad sense, is to generally foster adoption, right? We cannot expect the world to treat blockchain assets as world-class or first-class assets when they are consistently in danger of, getting drained from wallets, getting drained from the DeFi ecosystem, and essentially in the danger of users losing these funds, right? So that's not going to work. If we want adoption, we need to provide users with a reasonable confidence of security. Now, I think that this situation currently is not handled really well. I spoke about this at the beginning. We, as developers, go through great lengths at the beginning of the process of developing or deploying our project to ensure that this project is secure. But there is always that one moment, and that's that moment when the smart contracts get deployed and whatever did not happen before will just not happen because the smart contracts are now deployed, right? And so we do not like this situation. We would like to do something better at Zircuit, and through this, we would like to foster the adoption of blockchain, by the next billion users, right? So that is why are we looking in the security area in the first place. Now, you also had that subsequent question: what is important when you are building rollup as a security, when you are building a rollup product, right? So security in that particular case is also very important. You cannot offer security to somebody when your system on its own cannot guarantee the security for itself, right? So, in the past, I looked in my research at some of these areas of focus. So specifically for a rollup, when you think about what could go wrong. So I mentioned that every single rollup has a bridge, right? Throughout the past 3 years, probably, bridges probably stand for majority of all funds that were lost in blockchain hacks. If you look at your popular charts, you will actually find that it exceeds multiple billions of dollars in damages. And it's because bridges are extremely juicy targets, right? You take your smart contract on L1, where you need to lock some assets that will get minted on L2 as the counterpart of these assets. And these assets are just sitting there in that one smart contract, right? That, like, if you imagine that you are a hacker, that must be bothering you. Every single moment you see this tremendous amount of money money sitting out there, right? So for very obvious reasons, bridges got hacked. It was bordering some hackers. So that's one area where you need to definitely focus when building a rollup. Another area where you want to focus when building a rollup is the sequencing protocol and the rollup protocol itself. So I mentioned at the beginning that when you are withdrawing assets from a rollup, you need to somehow discard or burn those assets on L2 and roll up that state that shows that you have done that, right? That you have submitted such a transaction. So imagine that I could somehow fraudulently submit a state saying, hey, Martin has, burned 10 million ETH on L2. Please bridge. Now Martin should be entitled to withdrawing 10 million ETH from bridge on L1. So give it to him. That would be wrong, right? That would be another attack vector that can happen on a rollup. So I think those are the areas that are of the biggest concern.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, what's the future for ZK rollups? And what I mean by that is that, I mean, we mentioned off camera or before we started recording that you've, I hope I'm not saying this out of turn, but you've sort of been working on improving, I guess, the speed and efficiency of your proving system and modify the architecture to do that. Is it just a case that all roll-ups are going to fight to be the fastest and most efficient, or is there a different angle that we're going to go down, or what do you envisage the next 6 months, 12 months, 2, 3, 4, 5 years looking like in this sort of setting?
This is when I should pull out my crystal ball. I think, so I mentioned that the primary purpose of rollups is scaling Ethereum, right? Mm-hmm. Zero knowledge rollups, the time to finality is very heavily dictated by the ability of the rollup to produce the zero knowledge proof and roll up the state, right? One is the precondition for the other. So if you are proving extremely slowly, then that's time to finality and the time when people will be able to finish their withdrawals from your network. It will be long. And therefore, every single zero knowledge rollup network out there should be striving to achieve as fast proof generation pace as possible. And so therefore, this topic is definitely on the roadmap for Zircuit. And it will be for every single rollup out there or zero knowledge rollup out there. Everybody will want to be having faster proofs, be having smaller proofs, will be wanting to generate these proofs in a faster way, in a cheaper way, literally financially cheaper, because currently generating a zero knowledge proof is computationally very expensive. You will actually require some graphics cards. You will require a computer with a lot of RAM in hundreds of gigabytes, and it's by no means consumer grade hardware, right? So I think that where every single rollup will want to get is reduce this computational load that they are essentially carrying to produce those zero knowledge proofs. So that's one area. But then, we still arrive in the situation where we, in theory, can have tons of zero knowledge rollups that all generate the zero knowledge proofs fairly well, and in this sense they are equivalent, right? So then it comes to the second degree differentiators. So at Zircuit, our philosophy is that we would like the developers to be able to use the tooling that they are used to. So we are actually not developing some new runtime or new programming language. We want the developers to be able to use exactly the stuff that they are used to from Ethereum and other EVM compatible networks. This doesn't come for free. There is some engineering involved on the back end so that the users do not have to do that, right? So that's another topic for us. Then obviously I predict that the networks will be fighting for their differentiators for us. That might be security. We might come up with some more in the future, but I think that plenty of networks will be looking for things like that. Now, these can come from various directions, right? I've mentioned security at the sequencer level, which is what we are bringing. This is very technological advancement, but there might be universes in which networks benefit from their connection in the ecosystem, right? Or connection to some other product or something like that. So this is definitely going to be the topic of the upcoming development as well. What else? There are some features that rollups are missing. Very often what is missing is so-called escape hatch. So escape hatch is something that allows the users to migrate their funds outside of the rollup network, shall the operator ever become inactive for any kind of reason, right? And if you currently look at many of the rollups, they actually do not have this feature. So there is some feature completeness missing that developers will be striving for. Yeah, I think that the activity will be there, and that the space is going to develop in a pretty cool direction, both if you are looking at the user-facing features or if you're looking at the internals as a developer.
Yeah, I know it's a difficult question sometimes. I know the landscape changes so rapidly that sometimes you don't know what's going to happen sort of day on day, let alone in months and years' time. But that's really interesting insight. And you mentioned there about sequencer level security. I know that's something you've touched upon a couple of times and is a big part of what you're building and a big part of Zircuit. So yeah, do you want to dive a little deeper into what that term means and how that's sort of incorporated in what you're building at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. So I said at the beginning that the paradigm in blockchains currently is that when you broadcast a transaction to the network, some node in the network is going to pick it up and it will make it to the next block proposer, and the block proposer is going to look for that one available block where it can fit it in, right? And in exchange for that, they may get some block reward or gas fees or something like that. So this is what we currently do, or what the world currently does, and we want this to work a little bit differently. So we want the experience to be as follows. You are a user. If you're doing genuine stuff, transferring your NFTs from one address to another one, interacting with the DeFi protocol, or generally having some action that results with like a simple movement of assets, then you don't even notice a difference in your interaction with the blockchain. However, if you are a project that is currently under an attack, so there is a hacker somewhere out there who has just deployed a smart contract that is going to be used to exploit your particular protocol, then you should be able to rely on the blockchain as a secondary sort of defense, where if that attacker sends the hack transaction to the mempool, once this transaction makes it over to the sequencer is going to take a look at the transaction and the effect. So it is going to take this transaction, it's going to simulate it on the execution engine that we are using. We are specifically using Geth, and obtain an execution trace for this transaction. In that execution trace, you would be able to see who sent this transaction, what internal calls it is making to what smart contracts, what are the effects of the smart contracts, what is the asset movement, and so on. And so the sequencer will obtain this trace, and it will send it to some AI engine. This AI engine will take a look at this trace, maybe equipped with some additional data. You can perceive this additional data as I don't know, the transaction history of an account that is currently transacting. Say, did they make regular activity with other protocols in the past for the past 3 months, right? Then that's just something about them being a little bit more legit than potentially an account that has just showed up on a blockchain and has just received Ether that can be potentially traced to a previous hack or something like that, right? So this is all the type of data that can go into this oracle and into this machine learning model, which in the end has one primary purpose, and its purpose is to say, hey, this transaction is here to hack something, and this is the suspected damage and target, or this transaction is absolutely benign. So as I said, if the transaction is benign, everything should work as we are currently used to, the transaction gets included into the next block, and there is not a problem. If the transaction is not benign, though, you as the protocol should have the reassurance that it will not be mined. So the transaction will not be included in the next block. The sender of the transaction will be able to see that this transaction actually has not been mined. They will be able to query either our direct nodes from Zircuit, or take a look at our block explorer page looking for this transaction, where they will see a clear indication, hey, this transaction is not good enough. It does have some problem, and this is the problem. We suspect it of something, and it is currently quarantined. So if you are technical, what happens under the hood, Geth essentially receives a whole bunch of transactions that people would like to get included in the blocks, and it maintains a huge pool of them. And then it has a pre-selected transactions that actually, in fact, can be included in blocks. So those are the transactions that respect the nonce order, where, I don't know, the sender has enough ether, and so on. So those are the transactions that are immediately ready. So we have this larger pool and a small pool, and the sequencer level security acts when the transaction moves from one pool to the other one, where it would be immediately ready for the inclusion in the next possible block. So when we move that transaction, we ask the Oracle, hey, should we actually move it over, or should we not? And when the Oracle says, no, this is malicious, then we do not move that transaction over to what is ready for inclusion. Now, the question is, how long is this transaction gonna stay in this quarantine, right? And like, could we potentially have way too many transactions in the quarantine for the quarantine to be unmanageable, and so on. So for this purpose, we also define something called release criteria, because there are circumstances under which transactions can escape the quarantine or exit the quarantine. And these circumstances are essential, or these criteria are essentially defining the circumstances when the transaction becomes again benign and cannot hurt anybody over again. So example of such circumstances would be, for example, the transaction starts failing, because it's trying to hack a protocol, and the protocol was paused in the meantime. So right now, the transaction is trying to interact with something that was paused. Therefore, it's going to fail and not hack anything, right? So there are some situations under which we can release the transactions from the quarantine. Otherwise, the user, the sender of the transaction, can always cancel it. That's possible on blockchain, right? And replace the transaction with something that is actually not going to hurt anybody. So that's the principle of the sequencer level security. And we say sequencer level because everything in here happens at the level of the sequencer. It's the sequencer who makes the decision, oh, based on this information from the Oracle, I am going to or not going to include this transaction.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you running through. Everything from start to finish. I've learned absolutely loads, and it's been long overdue to sort of really nail down on the ZK rollups, and it's been awesome to learn a little bit more about what Zircuit is building. I guess just to finish things off, I know. Probably depending on when this video is launched, you may or may not have had your own launch. So are you able to share a little bit more about what's in store, I guess, in the short term for Zircuit, and what you envisage, well, once again, without necessarily getting your crystal ball out, but what you envisage over the next few months, or maybe to the end of the year?
So for the next few months, the biggest topic for Zircuit is launching mainnet. As I said, mainnet is supposed to come throughout the summer of 2024. Zircuit has launched a testnet in Istanbul last year. That was at DevConnect. So, we have focused this path to building up our transition to mainnet. So mainnet is definitely going to happen. And as soon as it happens, we are not going to, make too much immediate progress in terms of releasing new features, but we will focus our efforts greatly on ensuring that the mainnet is stable. That we have not left any bugs behind or anything that is sort of suboptimal. That the mainnet can operate reliably with minimum overhead, and that the users have the greatest experience. I think that this is the biggest topic for us for the remainder of the year. At the same time, I did say that sequencer level security is here, right? So we also plan on progressing that part of our system. So first of all, we will want to evaluate everything, right? We will want to make the system somehow available for external security researchers to conduct their studies, to develop their detection systems and engines, so that we can potentially integrate those in the future. But we will also want to do some work from our end. So we will want to experiment with, what is the actual boundary of where these particular models start failing, where they no longer protect the users effectively. We will like to push that forward, provide superior protection, improve performance of the entire system. There's just a lot of work in all the possible areas. So do expect focusing on feature completeness. Do expect focusing on improving the performance of SLS, and also do expect us to focus on the efficiency of our zero knowledge proof generating. I mentioned that as a topic for every single rollup that's going to happen. So
awesome.
Probably these three areas.
Well, I massively appreciate you joining me. It's been, I've learned absolutely loads. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting. Is there any final plug, any final bit of information, anything people should be checking out before you leave me? Anything you want to share before we go?
I think that people should be primarily checking out Zircuit, because testnet is available. It can be tried. People can build on it, and please do so, because mainnet is coming sooner than you think.
Awesome. I'll make sure to share all the links as well, so everyone can go and check that out. But yeah, massively appreciate you joining me, Martin. It's been an absolute pleasure. So yeah, all the best with your launch coming up this summer, and I'll make sure we stay in contact.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Awesome. Cheers, Martin. Speak soon.
Thank you. Speak soon.
Bye.